Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Compelling Conversations podcast. Tonight, I have a very cool man with me, Raudric. I haven't spoken to this gentleman in years, but he's very philosophical. I'm very excited to hear the things that he has to say tonight. Raudric, to begin, I was very intrigued when you first recommended Twilight of the Idols to me by Nietzsche. And I was intrigued because I'm aware that Ragnarok literally means twilight of the gods. So tell us about that book. What about it is so, just tell us about it.
Well, Twilight of the Idols. I'm by no means like a subject matter expert on Nietzsche, but Twilight of the Idols, How to Philosophize with a Hammer. For me, that book really represented when Nietzsche he moved from he really clarified his position on what the will to power becomes, right? Eventually. Are you familiar with the will to power concept?
Explain it.
Just the struggle of life, the struggle of individuals, right? The struggle of all things in order to, I guess, gather as much power as they can, right? And then exercise it in a way that ensures their survival or thriving, right? This was the will to power. This is what Nietzsche found underlined all of philosophy, right? All true philosophy, it underlined that. Oh, yes. And the will to power, it becomes the will to truth, right? Eventually, or the will to truth, I went the other direction. The will to truth, right, was what what philosophers for a long time were talking. That was what was underlying their aims was the will to truth, right? They were looking for truth in everything, right? Or where truth was. And there was a lot of arguments and discussions, and what Nietzsche came to state in How to Philosophize with the Hammer is that all wills to truth will eventually become the will to power, right? The struggle of all things in order to gather power and exercise it in whatever way they can. I had it backwards at first. Yeah.
No, that's cool. You mentioned philosophize with a hammer. What does that phrase mean?
To philosophize with the hammer, to do it, to philosophize without care or caution, right? To never necessarily tie down in any direction, to be able to hold multiple ideas and to use them at will.
Interesting. When I did tell you about this thing, about how Ragnarok means twilight of the gods,
yes,
you told me how you found it was interesting because of Nietzsche's concept of those things. Could you elaborate on that, if you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. The interesting thing for me in that was the twilight of the gods, right? The ending of these gods, right? The death of them. Nietzsche was directly, I believe in that book, How to Philosophize with the Hammer, Twilight of the Idols. What he was really aiming at to give was like an actual answer for what happens when gods die, right? Like, what does it look like? How do you deal with it? What is the way that Nietzsche saw to deal with it?
Yeah, that was very interesting. What is the way that he saw? Are you familiar?
It was yes. It was that idea that I mentioned earlier to carry multiple ideas or to be if you could carry multiple contradicting ideas and to exercise them at will, right? I believe that epitomized what that Ubermensch, the Uberman, right, was this individual who was never contained by any system or anything. You could think of Foucault, or not Foucault's, Camus' The Rebel, right? This individual who's not tied down by anything, who could use anything, right? They could touch any part of their humanity and exercise it.
I'm curious, have you ever studied Machiavelli?
Machiavelli, a little bit. I'm not too familiar. I've read The Prince. I'm familiar with the faking of the death. Um, yes, those are,
Is there a
yeah.
particular philosopher that really interests you, like right now, that you've been
At
studying?
the current moment, Jason Reza Giorgiani is actually he is a philosopher, but certainly a man that I'm interested in right now. He's
I've never heard of him. What is he about?
he's done a lot of study into the history of Iran. That is what a lot of his
Oh,
earlier work is on. Yeah,
interesting.
that was, and he ties it. It goes so beautifully into everything that he does. So Iranian Leviathan is his work that
Wow.
he's done on
That is an
Iran.
interesting title, Iranian Leviathan.
Yeah, isn't it Iranian Leviathan? Yeah,
Yeah, what is that
that's
about?
an Ronnie and Leviathan. I haven't gotten to that book yet. I've been starting with his earlier work. I'm reading Prometheus and Atlas, but I've
Prometheus and Atlas. Yeah.
collected, yes, I've collected all of his work and I've browsed through um, all of them already, but I'm starting really reading Prometheus and Atlas first.
What is that one about? Prometheus and Atlas.
Prometheus and Atlas, it starts where Jason Reza Giorgiani believes that people like Heidegger ended, right? So
Mm.
he's taking forward he's a parapsychologist at this point, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that field. That's a strange field, but he's taking phenomena that are typically discounted from the human experience, say things like there's kind of out there ESP, like being able in precognition. These are things that he talks about. He's taking those things or just phenomena that is outside the typical binary that most people exist in. He's going further and doing what he believes Prometheus and Atlas embodied, right? Prometheus being techne, right? The Greek techne, meaning technology, technique. He's talking about developing these things along with the Atlantean, what he views as an Atlantean Atlas, right? Of Atlas, not like Atlantis.
Yeah.
Atlantean. Yeah, he's taking on that responsibility for the world and carrying sort of a conscience with the technology that you're creating, right? And using these things in the right ways for humanity.
Mm. Interesting. When you mentioned Iranian Leviathan, I remembered something that you mentioned the other day about Nietzsche and how he drew on Zoroastrianism. Did you want to
Yes,
expand on that?
oh, yes, absolutely. I think there's an amazing connection from Germany to the Persian lands, right? Like all of,
Aryans. Yeah.
yes, entirely. They were the first philologists to actually study that part of the world. They were the first people to be able to get those
Mm.
texts and then translate them in, I would say, around Nietzsche's time, right? So we're talking like late 1800s, right? Yeah, so you could take his first work, right, or the magnum opus of Nietzsche, right? Thus spoke Zarathustra, right? And you could see the Zoroastrian influence in the name from there, right? But further, what I think he does with Zoroastrianism is he takes it and he uses it in order to critique Zoroastrianism, right? He takes Zarathustra and he critiques Zarathustra, right? Which I
Mm.
think is a wonderful idea to take the idea of something and compare it to itself, right? To really show off what its strengths and weakness are, right? To give it such a hard, like a juxtaposition, right? But just be
Yeah.
so opposite to it. Yeah. This is a thing I try to do in my own life where if I think that I believe something, right, I take myself and I'm like, well, why do I believe this? What is it about this that agrees with me, right? Am I just doing this because it's easy? Is this something that just makes stuff easier to cope with the world for me? Is this truth? Is this something that will bring me closer to power?
Mm. Is that the purpose that philosophy serves for you?
To philosophy serves multiple purposes, I believe, to connect and understand others, to understand the world, to connect to God, right? To understand what God has done here. Different, philosophies, to improve my own life, to look at myself and say, what are my flaws, right? What am I doing wrong, and what can I correct? I do that in a very kind of methodic way. I try to make it as methodic as possible.
I think I've only spoken to you like once ever in real life. And just in that one, encounter, you had so much like in your mind, like this stuff. It's cool, how did you start getting drawn to these things?
Honestly, Nietzsche was the first thing that actually drew me to all this stuff. It was pretty late in high school. I started realizing the things that I'm paying attention to are actually serving me. No, they're not doing nothing for me, right? The things I was just chasing girls. I was just really a pleasure-centered lifestyle. Just like what is going to make it easier just to deal with today. And then I came into contact with Nietzsche, right? There was just a YouTube video popped up on my feed, like history of Nietzsche, something about his life. And I was like, well, who's this dude? I liked his mustache. I thought he had a very impressive mustache. It was a very nice mustache. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, wow. It was talked about his life and some of his ideas. After that, I went to a bookstore and then I found Birth of Tragedy, right? I got Birth of Tragedy. It was his first work. I was like, wow, this has really broken the world down in a way that I can understand Apollonian and Dionysian, right?
Wow, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's deep stuff.
Yeah, those are things that I saw in the world so clearly, right? The Apollonian versus the Dionysian. I felt it viscerally inside me, those forces fighting. And that, I just connected with him from there. And then I've been on this path.
Yeah, that's really cool. Apollonian and Dionysian, do you want to explain that? Elaborate on it a little?
Oh man, the Apollonian versus the Dionysian. Those are really fun things to, like, when you have these models for the world, to go and just see them. The Apollonian being things, if you take like the older Greek cultures, right, and then you sort of break them into the components that you could kind of conceive of, right? You have like Greek high culture, right? The poetry, the law, things like this are very Apollonian. And then on the other side, you hear all these stories of wild people, right? You hear about the monads, right? They used to run wild in the woods and cannibalize their own children, right? These are both things that existed for the Greeks, and Nietzsche saw that and he was able to expound on it. And I think these things even exist for us. You see different manifestations of it kind of come about throughout history, right? You have, when you think of sort of even Victorian times, right? You have like the sort of royalty where those people exist and what their lives were centered around. And then you could think about the commoners and the things that they were engaged in, the types of drinking that they were engaged in, debauchery, just the wildness compared to the order.
Yeah, that's actually a beautiful way to put it. Wildness versus the order, the chaos in the order. Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know how familiar you are with the actual Greek deity Dionysus, but one of the interesting things about him is all the Greek gods feared him the most. Nobody wanted to approach him because he was pretty crazy. I always find that interesting. Yeah, there's plenty of things to say about that for sure. But one of the questions I had for you was, are you familiar with the works of Soren Kierkegaard?
Kierkegaard. I'm familiar with some of the works of Kierkegaard. I understand he had there were 3 phases, I believe, that he had broken man's life into. Not particularly familiar. I know okay.
No, that's cool. I was just curious. What about have you ever read Leo Tolstoy, or are you familiar with his ideas?
I'm familiar with Tolstoy, The Kingdom of God. That's the work of Tolstoy that I've read, The Kingdom of God being within you. Yeah. Was there another work that you had in mind?
No, I actually have not read Tolstoy, but I'm very interested in his character because his writings are they're just interesting. When like a quote pops up and you're like, wow, like who is
Hmm.
that person? I want to investigate, like that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. Uh
Tolstoy.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Tolstoy definitely. I love the humanist perspective of Tolstoy.
Mhm.
Humanism, I think, has been a beautiful thing for humanity. Right. I think a lot of the Renaissance was birthed through humanism. I do think humanism can go too far. Is I don't know if that's
What
something
does
you want
that
to get
mean?
into. When humanism goes too far is when I believe we take the individual and we make the individual more than what the individual is. We place so much importance on the individual that we
Mm.
lose sight of what we're a part of. I think that's when humanism can go too far.
There's an interview with Jim Morrison where he says, when I was a teenager, it was a very ordinary thing. Nobody really thought much of it. But now the teenagers, like that age is so glorified. Like that is
Hmm.
the age to be, and
Yeah.
everybody's centered around it. So what you just mentioned, I feel like that's when humanism goes too far. It's just making the individual what it's not.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you know any examples that are on your mind about that?
Our entire celebrity worship, right? Anything that I believe that celebrity worship, the way that politics has kind of become celebrity worship. I don't want to talk about politics, but just the intense focus on people being just a person, being the pinnacle of what they are, right? Not necessarily what they do, what they contribute to others, how they um, connect with others in their community, right? Or just people around them, right? What do they? Yeah, I think just people focusing on people being people isn't a solution to life, right? To accomplishing thriving, right? For humanity, to colonizing the stars. I don't know.
What do you think? This is a really good point. What do you think people focused on before?
Before they focused on community for one. I think they had a an easier picture seeing how they played a role in a community, right? Right now, I think we're a little disjointed from the roles that we could actually fulfill with others around us, right? There's a lot of people who I see who can do things, right, for others who don't necessarily try to. Not that like they have to or anything like that, but it's just there's no thought in them to reach out and connect to a community and start building things. I think that might have been more of a focus for people before. It's like, oh, we have to work together because we need to work together in order to survive, right?
Yeah. One thought that I've had based on what you were saying is I've met some people who they're amazing for the community, but when you talk to them one on one, you don't know who that person is. You just
Yeah.
it's very empty. It's like they're literally just a puppet for the community. Not
For
not even a
yeah,
puppet, really. That's not a way to put it, but
you know
I
what they're
imagine
gonna
you
say before they say it. They kind of have boxed ideas. Is this what you're?
when they're on the pulpit, right, or on the stage,
Mhm.
they like really hype people up and people are so excited and everybody wants to like them and love them and follow them. But when you talk to them one on one, it's like they're plastic people. You look into their eyes and there's nothing there. There's hollow. They don't really care about one on one encounters. They care more
Yeah,
about the adulation,
that
that sort of a
yeah,
thing.
what they get, the energy that they get from them being up there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
Oh,
strange because it's so many people that are like famous that I've met like that. It's just confusing to me.
I think that's a part of that celebrity worship when we're just worshiping, when we're looking at people and we're saying, for you being this thing, right? We like you for that. It's not like doing a thing. It's just being a thing. It's a different.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I don't know. It still confuses me. It really does. I think about that. But
what do you think people have sort of? I'm not sure if you're religious or anything like that. I don't. There's people who don't seem to have a connection to anything higher in their life. Like they need something that's outside of them in order to aim towards, right? Or to put this feeling of like I want to be in awe of something, right? I do think humans have this sort of drive to be in awe of things, right? To see large things, right? I love looking at clouds, and I love just thinking about how big they are, right? It just makes my brain feel good. Whenever I get to somewhere
Hmm.
tall, right, and I can see everything around me, it makes my brain feel good. I don't know why. Just seeing tall things makes me feel good. As a human, I think we all kind of have a drive to see tall things, right? And I think that's it carries also into like a spiritual aspect in which you want to spiritually see tall things, in which case you want to place
Yeah,
your
it's like you want to behold glory. But the
yeah,
interesting
absolutely.
thing pertaining to what I was just mentioning was, in my eyes, what those people are drawn to is a false glory, like a fakeness.
Yeah.
So it is beholding glory, but it's like it's
But
strange.
it's
Like,
not nothing real.
yeah, yeah, it's really weird. But that's really cool what you mentioned about the clouds and about standing in a tall place. I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever thought about that. That's interesting.
When you get there, I don't try to be aware of it. It's just something that comes out of me. I'm like, wow, I love this. I'll typically say it out loud to people around me. I'm like, I love being up here or something like that. I love seeing all this stuff. Yeah.
Does it make you feel like I'm just another human being or something
It
like that? A humbling
it
effect,
does, but in
if
a
that's a
comforting way.
uh-huh.
Yeah. In a comforting way. Like I'm
Uh,
a part of all of this, right? Like I understand that, not that I'm a ego filled person, but I understand that I have a role to fulfill, right? And to carry that idea while also seeing something that's so much higher than me, right? Something so much grander than me that has a life that I can't understand, right? To see that, it does comfort me in a way. Yeah, it's
uh,
real.
if you don't mind me asking, what is this role you think that you have to fulfill? Or you'd rather not
Um,
say?
there's an aspect. I'll say there's an aspect of learning and teaching to it, right? Not in any like academic sense or any particular sense. It could just be me learning how to build something and then teaching my kid how to do it, right? Teaching a child that I have in the future how to do it. Or saying something to someone that they've never heard before, and then them thinking about something in a different way. It's not like a grandiose role. It's more just like I'm here to absorb information and then carry it to other people.
Mm, that's cool. Like a channel, a vessel
Yeah.
in a way. Nice, nice. Are you at all familiar with the philosophies of Alan Watts?
Alan Watts. Yes, I am. I am actually familiar with Alan Watts. I last year, 2021, I spent maybe a few months like reading and listening to Alan Watts.
Yeah, he's a very interesting man. I read his book, Become What You Are. And
Mm,
there's several interesting things in there, but one thing that caught my eye was he discusses good intentions. And he says good intentions aren't enough. Like you have to like be kind of conscious of like what you're
hmm.
doing. Otherwise, you'll literally be like stuck in your own little hell just because you have good thoughts. That's it.
Yeah.
When it comes to thoughts and actions, how do you view those things?
I'm a person who's like, I'll tell people often, like I'll say, talk is cheap. I'll say that to people at work whenever I'm working around people. I'll say that to somebody if they say they'll do something. Um, but I do carry that kind of idea with me, right? Talk is cheap, right? What really does matter is what we affect in this world, right? I can have as many crazy ideas in my head, right? It doesn't matter if I'm not able to somehow bring something that is visceral, right, in a way that affects someone's life. It doesn't matter if I'm not able to do that.
Yeah,
Or even for myself, right? If I'm able to conceptualize a way for me to improve a situation, but I don't act on it, what is the point of that conceptualization even?
exactly. Exactly. What is the point of that? Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That is a very good point. And I feel like a lot of people, they might suffer from that. I know I certainly have, where
I
you
have
can,
too. Like I'm
yeah,
not perfect.
yeah,
These are
same,
things
same.
you have to push out.
Yeah, exactly. I've mentioned a few times now that like for myself, like when it comes to creativity or art, it's like a sickness that I have to get out of my system. So in that kind of context, I would agree. It's like the concept isn't enough. Like you have to
Mhm.
let it go. Otherwise, it just eats you up, you know?
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
does. You don't want stuff like that to sit inside you.
Yeah, why not? That's a good question. Why not?
Um, you ever see like what happens when you let yeast ferment for a long time? You do get alcohol, right? But like some you don't want you don't want to fill any vessel completely with alcohol all the time, right?
Yeah.
Um, in that same way, right? You wouldn't want to leave these things that could bring life, right? Bring like a jovial feeling. You don't want these, even if it doesn't bring a jovial feeling, whatever it is that's coming out of you, you don't want to keep these things in. Like a burp, right? Rather out than in, you know?
I like that. Like a bird. Oh, like a burp, you said.
Like a burp, yeah. When
Ah,
people burp,
Shrek.
they say,
Nice.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I'm talking about? Better out
yeah,
than
yeah. Where it
in.
says, yeah, yeah, rather out than
Yeah.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
right there. That's I love little idioms like that. And then
Yeah.
like witnessing their truth. I think they're there for a reason.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Are you familiar with, I'm sure you're familiar with the works of Carl Jung.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Carl, yeah, Carl
Yeah.
Jung.
Two questions for you on him. The first one, are you familiar with the Red Book?
I had a copy of the Red Book. Actually,
Wow.
when we had spoken, I was actually going through. I was trying to translate everything. Had
Wow.
an actual PDF. I couldn't buy a copy of it. I was a broke college student, um, but I did have a PDF, and I was reading through it and translating some of it when I had actually met you. It was around that same time period.
Wow. Interesting. My other question
Yeah,
about,
that
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I love that idea of what he did with the active imagination, right? Where he would have these kind of waking hallucinations, and he would be talking to things that were him. You know, these are things I think people could learn a lot from. I think this is it's a good practice, right? It's even a meditative sense, right? To have like an aspect of you that you can talk to, level with. Yeah.
Yeah. Very fascinating, man. Very fascinating works. I don't know if you're familiar, but there is a book called, I think it's called The Art of Carl Gustav Jung. And it's just
Mhm.
like paintings that he's made of his dreams or whatever. And you like examine those, and it's like, wow, like one, this man was a real artist, and two, it's like, damn, like how do you capture all of that? It's
Um,
really otherworldly, you know?
Yeah, I've seen some of his paintings. They are absolutely otherworldly. Is a fantastic
Yeah,
way to
yeah.
like.
By
What
the
do you think
way,
you've gotten from them?
well,
Like,
before I answer that, yeah, I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off.
it's okay.
One thing I wanted to mention was that the Red Book, I believe it was like 10 days later that he passed away after writing that. But
Mhm.
one thing that I've gotten from Jung, I've gotten too many things, but one thing that's been on my mind that he has said is something along the lines of criticism is not liberation. It doesn't free a person if you criticize them. There has to be like another way for you to help free somebody. That's one of the things that I think is very profound. It's always on my mind. So I try
Yeah,
not to criticize people.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's actually a fantastic thing. I think I am a person who can be too critical of others. Right, I've seen that
It
in myself.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
I'm not
think
perfect. I have to say that again.
I I've had to learn how to temper my criticisms of people. Like
Mm,
even with my wife, sometimes she's not that I'm saying anything that's too mean, but I'm like, wow, I could really say these things better. Or even with other people, I've had to learn. You don't really have to point these things at people like this. You can show them.
yeah. Are you interested in the arts?
As like painting, or are you saying music? Or are you saying
Uh, all of those things in general. And the reason I'm curious is
um
because I feel like it has a connection with psychology and philosophy for sure.
it absolutely does. Are you familiar with Pythagoras?
Yeah, yeah.
I've been getting more into Pythagoras just because the music stuff that he has, the music theory, right? How harmony and resonance operate, right? I learned that he actually has systems for these things that correlate to how the planets move. And I'm like, wow, I need to learn this because it has like
Wow.
a relationship with geometry as well. So that's a way that you see that music, geometry, and astronomy all connect to each other.
Wow.
Pythagoras. Yeah, so I've been wanting to really look into that. But yeah, I'm super interested in the arts. I do I spend time looking at paintings that old alchemists have made, right, where they depict where what the moon is doing and what the sun is doing, and different ways that elements react. I love looking at those things and reading narratives into them. When I was in high school, I played music, I had a band with a friend. Um, yeah, I used to make paintings. I used to graffiti. Graffiti was a thing for me. Yeah, it was I was really pushing myself into art at one point in time, and I've kind of more so. I used to write poetry. I used to write stories. Now I've more
Wow.
so
I feel like you'd be
been
pretty good
looking
at
for
that.
stories, writing stories.
Well, stories, poetry, all that. I feel like you'd be really cool at doing those
I
things.
really do love the written word. That's what I do a lot of expression in actually now. So I don't really try to paint or draw anymore. It's a lot of writing.
Wow. You mentioned that you were pushing yourself into the arts. Do you still feel that way, or is it just you kind of come naturally, if
It's a
even?
lot more natural. Yeah. With the writing, it kind of just comes out of me, right? When I look outside, I kind of have little stories. Whenever I'm looking at a dog, I'm like, well, this dog is doing this thing. And I kind of love making little stories in my head. I spend time making little stories all the time. And sometimes they actually come out in like ways that I like, they just come out of me, right? I'm like, well, I have to write this now, right? Little story about what a turtle did when it saw my dog, right? Because I like see a truth in it, right? I see like
Wow.
a something that's honest about life.
I can relate to that. I imagine. I think I can. When you said that little part about like when you see that little random moment and you see a truth in it.
Mhm.
Do you mind like elaborating on that a little bit more?
Well, I see that they're everywhere, right? If you look at any aspect of life, we've kind of, if you break down what narrative structures kind of exist, we've for one, they've already been. I think a lot of the narrative structures have already been written, right? And we're kind of seeing them play out over and over again. And whenever you see them, they express a truth about life, and then anytime you see it anywhere else, you can kind of connect all these things. You can say, this is like this situation here. And people do that in their own lives. But I think when you take it and you put it in history, right? And like, what happened in the Spanish Revolution, right? Like, how is it similar or dissimilar to the Bolshevik Revolution, right? You see these little things. And you can find all kind of little narratives that existed throughout all of history that play themselves out over and over again.
Yeah.
Even in religious texts, right? If you take the Vedas, the Quran, or the Bible, the Torah, you can take all these and see truth, like just little stories, that they all say, right? They're all saying the same thing.
When you mentioned the whole thing about how it's all been said, it reminded me of something David Lynch once said, which was, yeah, everything has been said, but it hasn't been said by you.
Yes,
So I think, yeah, do you feel like that as well?
I do believe there plays a role of the observer in the world, right? So all of us, right? All of us that
That's
are
cool.
aware of anything, or whenever a person is aware of something, they are projecting whatever they have inside of them onto that thing, right? And any type of expression that they will have about that thing, it does have a aspect that comes only from them, right? There's
Yeah.
an aspect of this expression that could only be done by them, whether it's through simply how they would vocalize it, right? The way that their vocal cords are structured, the way that they have, like, maybe their shape is the shape of their mouth is like this, so they say words a little differently, right? These are all kind of the little things, the little parts of our perspective that we put on the things.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes it special in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I suppose, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that you wanted to express, you felt like you didn't get a chance to?
No, man. It's awesome talking to you. I didn't. No closing thoughts. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you wanted to say?
Um,
Actually, I do
well,
have something that I want
go
to
ahead.
say.
Go ahead.
I think, um, yeah, we have to focus more on what community has to offer for people, right? What connecting to people has to offer for people. We have to be less focused on the individual, right? That's what I
Mhm.
have to say. That's sort of the place that I'm at right now.
I really like that. And there's definitely a huge element of truth to that. Yeah. And that plays a role with sincerity as well, like just what do you care about? That kind of a thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I had any other closing thoughts really. Yeah. I suppose that's about it. But it was awesome talking to you. It was really cool.
Yeah, man.
You definitely have that whole mosaic of knowledge on you, which is really cool to
Oh,
explore.
I read a lot.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an important thing. Yeah. Well, good speaking to you, Roderick.
You
Really
too,
appreciate
man.
you making it here. Um, it was a pleasure hosting you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being here and talking to you, man. We haven't talked in a long time. It was awesome.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, crazy
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, man. 2 years.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for being here again. You take care. Yeah.
Have a good one.
All right. Night.
Night.